Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Crystal Eye Module 2 webinar. My name is Tina Barboza, and I'm the Business Development Manager. We also have Vikas Sharma. He's the Business Development Manager for Victoria and New Zealand. I'm sure most of you guys already know him. We also have James Brine. He's the security expert at Red Piranha, and he'll be walking you through the configuration and tuning of Crystal Eye. So we do have Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and he will be more than happy to answer all your queries. Just give me a second. Can you see my screen? Yeah. So we had a module 1 webinar last Wednesday, and by now you'd be familiar with how we create a store account, understand the ACL interface, different levels of SIEM services, how to purchase Crystal Eye and other security services, schedule precaps, and vulnerability scan. So today we're going to cover different items, right from deployment options, basic device setup, network interface setup, network controls, security configuration, compliance controls, reports, system dashboard, security dashboard, and support channels. So as I said that we will have a Q&A at the end of the webinar. If you have any specific questions regarding the setup or configuration of Crystal Eye, feel free to add that in the chat box and James will answer all your queries. So for the practical exercise, what we want is you'll see that on the right hand side, we'll add, okay, James has already sent the links for you guys to create the account so that you can play around with the solution when James will be walking you through the configuration module. So the default username is admin. Is that right, James? Yeah.
Second.
All right. So it's default username is admin. Even the password is admin. Yeah, you can take the control from here. Stop sharing. Yeah.
Just need to accept the risk there. The Crystal Eye has its own certificate authority built in, so it's a self-signed certificate. That's why you're getting that message. So if you just enter admin and admin as the username and password, you'll be presented with the getting started page. So if anyone has any issues at any point during these first few steps, just let me know. We do have some spare instances that can provide you login details too. There's one step here, specifically the network interface configuration. We need to set a LAN interface to external. If that step is skipped or if you do it on the wrong interface, you'll lose the ability to connect to the instance. So just be wary of that. So now we'll just click on next in the top right hand corner to proceed to the password changing screen. I'm just going to set a password here. These instances will be recycled, so just a password for the moment that you can remember that is secure enough to meet our upper lower number and symbols requirements. And then you'll be presented with the network interfaces page. So when everyone's at this point, just let me know in the chat. Just and Brian, Tim, okay. So just Prashit and Sean. Oh, Sean's just watching. Yep. Okay. So we're just going to click on the edit button on the LAN 1 interface, not LAN 2. And we're going to change the role here from LAN to external. So I'll just leave that on my screen for a second, make sure it's set up how it is here. And once that's done, just click on the update button. And we should now see a LAN 1 interface and a WAN 1 interface. And we'll just click on next in the top right hand corner to proceed. And we'll just do a DNS lookup confirmation here. You'll see a internal IP address. This is the DNS Ensure server, which is part of the security services within the Crystal. So it runs its own DNS internally to provide some blocking and security features. We'll just click on next again once that's succeeded. And we'll be presented with a register system now. So just click register system. And you'll need to enter into here the email address and password that you used for the client dashboard in module 1. And under system name, you'll need to give it a unique identifier. Avoid spaces in this. So there's no options here for changing the environment. You will need to, in a real world scenario, agree to the terms of service. You can click here to read through those. And once that's done, just click on register system. So you'll see that it's connecting to our SIM to allow our Security Operations Center to receive the events generated by the Crystal Eye. And once that's complete, you'll get a SIM status connection in the bottom there. So this should take place pretty quickly. If you have any issues with the username and password, I'll just wait a few seconds. And then we'll move on. Switching to watch mode. That seems to happen a bit. Alrighty, so we'll just click on next in the top right and move on. And we'll get the software updates page here. This should take place pretty quickly. If you want to click update all, this will update each of the applications within the Crystal Eye as well as the software itself. Sure if it was somebody that's attending this webinar just in regards to deployment options and virtual instances. So we don't currently have a automatic or application that can be deployed in the cloud. We do have a manual instance that can be deployed by our administrators. So if you do require a virtual instance on site, we can set up a VMware instance for you. Obviously there's a cost for that installation process, but we are working with Amazon at the moment to create an application that can be deployed. So we're looking at the time zone settings here. That's set to Perth, and so we've got NTP enabled. So we can just click on next to continue there. Shouldn't really need to make a change. You can specify your own NTP server if you have that specific requirement. So under devices here, this is the storage manager. As this is a virtual instance, there's just this one 21 gigabyte drive. If you did have external drives plugged in at this point in time during the install process, or if you had a customized C40 or 80 or similar that had additional drives, you could specify where these are mounted to and what you use them for in this part of the installation process. You can come back to this later if you do add additional drives externally, or if you want to change the mount points. Just click on next to continue. And we're going to select the SIM service level here. So there's a quick overview of the log information that's sent to our Security Operations Center for each of the SIM services. So just quickly have a look at gold. You'll see there's more logs being sent from the Crystal Eye. For the moment, we'll just set that to silver and proceed by clicking next in the top right hand corner. So risk auditing section, this is actually moved from this part of the installation process. These virtual instances are Crystal Eye version 1.3, I believe. We're currently sitting at version 3, so there's a few changes, or quite a few changes, between these instances and the current hardware instances that we use. So this is one of the things that's moved, particularly because it's based upon the setup that you do after you've deployed, or after you've done this initial deployment of the Crystal Eye in regards to backups and things like that. So for the moment, we'll skip through that, just click next to pass by the risk auditing section, and we'll get to the marketplace, which is the last section of the installation process, where you can select particular applications to deploy. Again, this is something you can come back to later if you want to add additional functionality to the Crystal Eye. We'll just add a few of them for the moment to assist with the demonstration. So I've selected by category here, and I'll click on next in the top right hand corner. And you'll see we have a few category options across the top. So anti-malware file scanner, application filter. I'll choose the 2 additional firewalls. Look into the security configuration. Sorry, network control. You'll see we have one-to-one NAT, DMZ, multi-WAN, port forwarding, lots and lots of options here. I'll just select a few of them. We have a automated packet capture tool as well, and incident response straight from the device, and a couple of additional visualization applications for reports. So now we've selected a few of those, we'll just click on next again. And we've got a list of the applications to install here. Currently everything's free in the store, but we do have provisions for additionally providing third-party or paid applications in future, but the cost is bundled with the SIM license. So when I'm happy with that, I'll click download and install there. And we'll just wait for that transaction to take place and for the applications to be installed. If I'm moving too fast at any point, just let me know in the chat. We can assist with catching up, or if you have any questions, just let me know as well. Menu and move to the dashboard, which will complete the installation. It's important to click one of these, otherwise these applications won't have menu items on the left hand side in this version of Crystal Eye. So just click on it, move to dashboard. And now we'll see that we have a basic interface here. We've got some warnings across the top saying that there's a few applications that are stopped. This is pretty common with these virtual instances. So you can come down here to the application status, which is within the system dashboard, and click on start next to these applications. And we should see them swap to the running state. There is within the client dashboard this same information as an overview to see whether or not all the the applications are running on the Crystal Eye, so you don't actually have to log into the Crystal Eye. You can just check your client dashboard to find that information. And we've got some events here, some low memory issue due to the virtual machine. We've got some informational events and some warnings. And we can click view to see these events in more detail. Most likely these are brute force attacks. As soon as we put up a virtual instance, we see China trying to log in. So yeah, we have a few failed logins already. They will, after a few times attempting to brute force the login, they'll be blocked permanently, or at least for 15 days. So looking at the system dashboard, we have some overview information of network traffic on the local area network and the WAN interface. We can specify different time periods here. It looks like we don't have anything currently on the WAN interface. This device has just been swapped over to have an external connection, and there's nothing sitting behind it, so that's not surprising. CPU usage we can look at again by time period, or we can specify to look at the instantaneous CPU usage across the different application layers. We'll see a little chart there. The same with the RAM. We can look at different time periods, and we can specify the instantaneous memory consumption. Finally, I have a couple more overviews here of the disk consumption. The new version of Crystal Eye has a more interactive disk usage chart here as well. And we see users and groups. Currently, we just have one admin group, one admin user and two groups, the users group and the admin group. And finally, in the bottom right, we have the software activity. These are the updates that have just taken place as part of the installation process. So next up, we have the security dashboard, which is an overview of all the security controls or technical controls implemented within the Crystal Eye. And we'll just click on this search button to get the traffic from the last 24 hours. Whether or not we'll have anything because it's just recently been created is another story. Usually what we'd find here is a timestamp, source IP, destination, country, city, signature, which is the IDS IPS signature, an action that is taken, so either drop, reject, or pass. The category of the IDS IPS rule related to that, so that might be Trojan traffic, it might be information, the port that's come through, and a severity ranking. Each of these is color-coded by these colors across the top. You'll see the protocols from FTP to ICMP, and you'll see lines as well that show the geographical location of the attacker and the destination of the attack. So it's quite easy to correlate where attacks are coming from and by what protocol. You can also then narrow it down by time periods. And if you click on any of the information that usually exists within this table, it presents a pop-up that shows more information, specifically the rule that has flagged this alert. You also have the option to change the action that's taken by the IDS IPS engine, which is part of the tuning process that we will work through with you in the first couple of installations to tune the device specifically for your client or for yourself. So you might find that, for example, you're running a web proxy auto discover, and that's flagging an information event every time that somebody connects to the web proxy. So you can change that action to not alert you. So unfortunately, we don't have any more information there. Maybe at the end of the webinar, I'll just quickly jump onto the Red Piranha website where there's a screenshot that shows this in action. Unfortunately, I can't show you any live customer dashboards because there's confidential information. Finally, in this section, we have device internal IP addresses and the traffic usage. So it's a good way to see network consumption across your network, and also by protocol. So we have the different protocols and the traffic utilization there. We have some IDS IPS stats. Again, there's no information in this because there's nothing behind it, and it's just barely been connected half an hour. and we have a network map here, which I'll jump into in a second. So under system configuration, we have a number of account management options. There's the internal Active Directory server, or LDAP server, and the configuration options there. And we can also add users and groups under the account roles section. So we'll see the admin group and the all users group, of which the user that we're currently logged in is part of. We can add a user here with the add button. We can specify some parameters and password, and we can choose groups that they should be added to at the bottom. You can also edit existing users. If you create a new group, you can then come in and edit the user and associate them with an additional group. We'll find that that user is already part of the admin group there. So under backup, we have a few options. There's the bare metal backup and restore. So this will take a configuration backup of the Crystal itself, which is particularly useful if you purchase a second Crystal and you want to put them into high availability or load balancing mode. So you can take the existing configuration from one and quickly apply it to the other. And similarly, there's the configuration backup and restore. So this is similar to the bare metal backup and the restore, but you can have this take a configuration backup on a schedule. It'll also email you based upon a notification. Was it successful? Were there any errors? You can also come in here and restore, and we have a number of different options for the backups to go either to the local device, to our cloud backup services, to your own server, Azure, or to an external USB device. And the storage manager, this is again, it's moved in the the menu structure of the new Crystal, but this contains, as per the initial part of the installation, the different devices, their mount points, their size, and their current status. So we'll see a number of different mount points here. Forensic logging and database servers, for example, you could specify these to go to different volumes. I believe there's also a RAID application that can be installed to configure custom RAID arrays and then apply different mount points to those RAID arrays. So clicking on date and time, this is the same again as the initial installation. It's just the time zone configuration. And under general settings, we just have the theme. So we do have the option to change the interface. Currently there's just this one theme, but we have provided that functionality in future. There are some white labeling options open to partners, so that you can put your own custom logos in this interface and also into the block pages for the web proxy content filter, for example. Under mail settings, we'll see the configuration of the default mail gateway. So this is just set to the internal mail server. This will allow the Crystal to generate and email reports. And we have SSH keys. So SSH, it is open on the Crystal, but it's only for the purpose of our staff to diagnose and resolve any issues remotely. Now, we do have a very stringent internal process regarding the acquisition and release of passwords to the relevant staff members. So it's a as needed basis. We'll need to confirm with you that it's okay to log into the Crystal. The password will be obtained by the relevant staff member, and then they will log in to resolve issues. We don't provide any sort of limited SSH interface for customers. So moving on to security configuration, we'll see the content filter and proxy. This has gone through a number of changes recently, but for the moment we can see the basic configuration steps within this version of Crystal. So we have some exception and banned IPs, and also the configuration of the web proxy itself. So there's a number of different performance levels here, and whether or not it's configured to be in transparent mode or not. And if we click on the configure button there, under the policies, we'll see some different policy options. So we can ban files by their MIME type, particularly for multimedia. We can recognize particular phrases that exist on websites and alert or drop traffic based upon that. File extensions and specific band and gray and exception sites. This can also be applied to users and groups relative to an Active Directory implementation. So you can connect your AD server to the Crystalli and you can specify a group that is part of or is not part of the web proxy group within the Crystalli's security implementation. So DNS Ensure I mentioned earlier. This is the internal DNS server that's running on the Crystalli itself. It provides some protection against known phishing and malware delivery domains, but it also applies some ad blocking functionality in the newer versions of Crystalli. So there's no option within this interface because it's an older version, but you do have the options in the newer one to block ads on your network. So onto firewalls, we have three types of firewalls here. There is a custom firewall, which is a IP tables implementation. So if you know what that means and you have an existing configuration, or if you want to specifically set out an IP tables configuration, you can come in here and add rules, IP tables rules, as you would normally in an interface by order, and then they will apply to the network. Otherwise, there is a DMZ firewall if you've created a DMZ segment within the networking configuration, which I'll get to in a minute. There is a egress firewall, which is specifically for outbound communication. So this is currently set to allow all outgoing traffic, but you can pinhole through the network. To allow or block incoming connections. Which will protect the web interface and the SSH interface from brute force attacks. So you can see there's a max of 5 tries here, and they're banned for 168 hours or 15 days. Malware file scanner. So this is sitting and scanning the Crystalli itself for any malware that may exist. We have an anti-phishing engine, which applies a number of different signatures and heuristics on mail traffic that is passing through the mail relay. If the Crystalli is configured to accept and pass on emails through itself. So this can detect a number of known phishing attacks and alert and block emails based upon that detection. And finally, we have the antivirus engine, which is working at the web proxy level to detect and remove or sanitize any malware that may be passing through web interfaces. So under intrusion protection and detection, we'll see the IDS IPS engine is currently set into detection mode, which is a standard for a new deployment of Crystalli. So this comes back to the tuning process whereby you set the Crystalli into detection mode and you note the unusual or normal traffic. There may be false positives within your network to change the action from these to reject or to pass. And once that's done, you can then swap the Crystalli over into protection mode, and that will apply those rules. So it'll drop, it'll reject, or it'll accept traffic that flags against those particular rules. So we can come into rule sets, categories, and rules here and just have a quick look at the categories that we have. So this is currently set into the rule set, which is the balanced rule set. We're actually changing the names of these at the moment to make them more obvious as to what the applications are. For the moment, the balanced one is generally the one that applies to your average network. If you have some specific web application firewall requirements, you can set it into the WAF mode, and we also have a OT or SCADA rule set specifically for that sort of implementation. And we can see the different categories here of IDS IPS rules. So for example, SCADA I mentioned before, for OT networks, we have different shellcode exploit detection, mobile malware, and so for example, games, we can detect certain types of networked games, and we have a lot of rules for Trojans, specifically not just for the download of a Trojan, but rather the command and control communication to specify jobs or actions for a zombie host to take. So quickly jumping onto log processing and reporting, these are the total log files from the crystalline by time and date. You'll see the current limit is set to 2 gigabytes before it recycles that. So within the compliance controls, there's a forensic logging section where you can set the crystalline to back up its logs automatically to an external or internal volume or to a cloud server as required, depending on your compliance requirements. The last two things here under security configuration, with the exception of the application whitelisting, which hasn't been installed on this particular instance, but I can discuss that in a minute. We have an application filter. So you can come in here and specify known or basic web applications, websites like eBay and social media, and different games and cloud service providers like OneDrive and Office 365. And we can also block by protocol, and rather whitelist, which applies to the application filter as well. So we can block certain protocols like SQL servers and file transfer and video games. How many applications are listed? So this, it's a sort of basic implementation relative to the application whitelisting application. So it's sort of here as an easy to set up version of the application whitelisting. I'm not sure exactly how many, but I imagine it's around 150 or 200. Whereas the application whitelisting application can basically determine the existence of and uniquely fingerprint every single version of any networked application that exists, so long as it communicates through HTTPS or SSL encryption. So we have a number of, I think it's the top 1,000 Windows and Mac OS X applications that we have existing fingerprints for. So if you set a baseline within the AWL interface, it'll show you what applications are running within the network, and you can then lock that down. So if somebody comes into your network and connects by Wi-Fi and they have a application that is not approved by that application whitelisting application, then it will not establish any sort of outbound traffic. If there is an update that takes place, or if there's a new application that's installed on the network, it'll create a fingerprint within that AWL app, and then we will either create a new string for you so you know what that is, so you can be approved, or you can block that if required. So that's it's probably best if you want to find out more about the application whitelisting to look at the Certified Crystal Eye Engineer course, because it's actually quite a in-depth topic, and we don't really have the time to cover it in today's webinar. So Certificate Manager, this is related to the certificate authority within the Crystal Eye, which ties into the web proxy, which can act as a man in the middle, allowing it to decrypt HTTPS traffic, which allows the content filter and the different security implementations like the web proxy and gateway antivirus to act upon HTTPS traffic and not just plain text traffic. So once this is configured, you could come into the web proxy server section, and there is an option. Sorry, it's moved again. It's somewhere else. I have to come back to it, but there's an option to export the security certificate, which you then apply. Oh, yeah, sorry, it's here. You click Create Certificate. You can apply that intermediate certificate to the endpoints, which will allow that man-in-the-middle decryption of SSL traffic. So usually on a Windows network, you'd apply that by a group policy or similar. So network map, this ties into the compliance control section and the compliance wizard that I mentioned before, and also a number of different security configuration options like the web proxy. You can specify certain device types that are part of those groups. So when a device is connected either with a static IP or it's given an IP lease by the DHCP service, you'll see a interface, username, IP address, date last seen, MAC address in here, and then that device can then be associated to one of these groups. So there's been a number of improvements in this interface and the way stuff is displayed here in later versions of Crystal Eye. Unfortunately, I can't show you those, but I'm sure if you ask your account manager, they can give you some more information about that. So DHCP server, DNS server, IP settings, and the SSH server, similar standard sort of stuff you'd see on any network gateway. We do have a number of features within the IP settings, however, such as VLANs and virtual interfaces. So if you want to create some logical network segmentation within your network, if you do have a Crystal Eye 20 series and above that has additional interfaces, then you can create zones, DMZs, and VLANs within your network within this interface. And also multi-WAN, so that you'll see in the previous, the IP settings where it was before, you could create 2 WAN interfaces, and then if you had either a load balance or a dual WAN connection, so maybe you had 2 fiber connections or a fiber and a 4G failover, something like that, that can be configured within this interface. Port forwarding, again, it's fairly standard. You can choose a port external to internal, internal to external to forward. VPN configuration will require the setup of that security certificate section that I was in before, but the Crystal Eye can act as a VPN server. It will export the VPN, OpenVPN config, and then you can apply that to devices that need to connect through to this network externally. So finally is the web proxy configuration. Again, there's some more options in newer versions of Crystal Eye, specifically for education and schools. We do have YouTube for schools in here, but we also have Google Safe Search and YouTube Safe Search enforcement if required. And there's also some performance tuning options if you want to set the maximum option size and cache size. I'm not certain, Sean. I'd have to get back to you on that one. So you'll see some rule configurations here, some bypass and authentication exception sites if you need to create some specific exceptions for the web proxy. We'll jump into compliance controls. So there's this DLP application. Within this application, you can upload files. It'll then create a hash for that file, and you can either alert or stop that file transferring across or external from the network, depending on the way the Crystal Eye has been configured. Rather, depending on the deployment configuration of the Crystal Eye. And again, we'll need to configure this one. We don't have the time to go through that. So if you want to find out more about the incident response services, you'll have to sign up for the CEC course. Just on the note of that, we are currently taking beta testers for the CEC course. So if you have a look at our latest newsletter, that's, I believe it's going out today, you'll see an option there to email us to establish your interest. We can add you to the testing group, and there's a whole trove of videos there that go into a lot of detail in these applications. So we have some additional backup options here within compliance that are supplementary to the actual Crystal Eye backup options. The first one being the backup PC tool. So there's a couple of steps that need to be taken here to configure the backup PC application. Firstly, clicking on Start over there in the right-hand corner. Then you need to set a password, and you can go into this tool So this will allow you to set up a sort of simple backup tool that'll back up from servers and workstations on your network, either by Samba or RSH or NFS, or rsync rather. So it's if your client has an existing backup solution as part of a gateway, this is a good way to replace that within the Crystal. There's also a database backup tool here, so you can connect to a MySQL server with username and password, and you can create a scheduled backup of that. And the forensic logging I talked about before, so you can export all of the logs from all of the services on the Crystal with a schedule, either to external or to cloud or local storage. There's also the option here for a full backup of all the logs that exist on the device. So this is good if you need to meet some specific logging compliance requirement. And then finally here we have a simple network file share option. Again, this requires the configuration of the security certificates, so putting in your business name and whatever else. Pcap snaps, this is one of the applications I installed initially as part of that installation process. So if there is an incident within your network, we can order, or you can order yourself, a scheduled packet capture. This allows our forensic investigators to do either manual or automatic analysis on a large segment of traffic. Usually this is something we'd scheduled for outside business hours, but it allows us to detect the existence of either malicious traffic to known compromised or known attacker IP addresses externally, and also to try and determine the path of an attacker within your network, be it traversal or data exfiltration or whatever it might be. So the important fact here is that you don't need to either send out a technician or apply some additional network devices to be able to create this packet capture. It makes the whole process very simple. To click a button, set a time and date, and our security operations center can receive those packet captures and start working on the analysis of them. So risk auditing, this section has changed quite significantly, and it does actually require a lot of these things to be set up, but it will give you a risk rating based upon certain ISO 27001 compliance controls. And again, that ties into other things like this vulnerability scan application. So this will take a little while to set up, but it's similar to the packet capture in that you can schedule a service at a certain time and date, and then that information is then passed on to our security operations center for the purpose of creating a report. So this might be just for compliance, might be a follow-up on a penetration test or something similar. So the three options you have here are the internal, which will run a internal vulnerability scan, and then there's an external or externally facing vulnerability scan, which sends a request to our security operations center and rerun a vulnerability scan from outside your network to see what's visible to outsiders. And then finally, there is a web application vulnerability scan where you can specify a website that you own that we can run a vulnerability scan on. And when each of these is complete, you'll receive a vulnerability scan report within your client dashboard. This is going to take a while, so I'll just skip through to the next section. It needs to download a bunch of applications to actually run that vulnerability scan from the Crystal itself for their internal vulnerability scan. So just to note, again, with packet captures, it's best not to run this during standard business hours, obviously depending on how your network is configured and who uses it and what they use. But it does create a lot of noise within the network, and it can also create instability because the way the vulnerability scan works is that it will send a lot of packets to try and intercept and determine what services and applications and vulnerabilities exist within your network. A lot of devices will just accept and do stuff with those packets. So if you have printers spitting out bits of paper with gibberish on them, it's probably best to keep that for outside business hours. So under reports, we'll see an executive report. This is the only one of these that I'll really look at because it actually combines the functionalities of the rest of these report sections. So you can specify a number of different reports that you might want to correlate or aggregate rather. Click update here after choosing some options. And that'll create a baseline executive report for this bank of individual reports. And then you can schedule those to happen on a certain frequency, who to email them to, and the action to take. And there's also the ability here to export this as a PDF for a certain date range. So this includes things like which devices in your network are transmitting data, what were the top external IP addresses, attackers, who's been blocked, how much disk usage is there, what IDS IPS rules are flagging most commonly, which network interfaces are being used most frequently, and it also ties into that compliance controls section I mentioned previously with the risk ratings. And finally, we have the marketplace. So we jumped into this early in the install. The marketplace gives you the option to add functionality to the Crystal Eye. We don't add them all as default because the menus become overwhelming. So just as needed, you can add in additional applications by different filters. Oh, I didn't select anything. Just remember to click on the search button and not the install button. And yeah, we'll see the same applications here that I was looking at before. So for support options, there's a number of different functionalities or portals open to you. So you can submit a bug directly to our support system at support.redpiranha.net, or send an email to support@redpiranha.net. We also have a chat functionality, or you can send us a message through the website. There's a forum.redpiranha.net, and there is some support functionality through your account dashboard. Obviously, you can give your account manager or BDM a call if there's any concerns, and our tech staff will do our best to come back to you with a solution. So that's it from me. If there's any questions, just let me know in the chat, and I'll see if I can answer those for you, with the exception of Sean's question about the VPN. I'll have to come back to you on that one. Thank you.
Guys, if you have any questions, feel free to add that in the chat window. So in today's webinar, we saw different deployment options as well, like Crystal Eye device can deploy into single WAN, multi-WAN, site to multi-site VPN, then single or multiple subnets, DMZ, then built-in wireless WAN this is usually for our series 10 and 20, which are the base models, but with the high ones as well.
Have the ability to do IPsec tunneling. So if you want to create that connection between two networks, not just for clients, yes, you can use the SD-WAN functionality. After this is over, so if you just want to continue to have a play around, if you need more time, just let your account manager know and we can try and organize something.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so the next step would be normally most of our MSPs who are onboarded, they get the NFR device, or they directly purchase the Crystal Eye. So NFR would be a good option where you can play around with the solution, understand the solution, different features, how it works, and then it will be easy for you guys to discuss the same with your clients. We can also have in-person meetings. You can just talk to me or Vikas. We will organize that for you. We do have Crystallize certified engineer training in the store account itself, so you can access those. And soon we'll be also coming with online learning platform. So, as James already discussed about the support channels that we have, so we have different tabs in the store, in the dashboard itself, for support. Then that is the ticketing system. Then we do have forum, where you can like report the bug, or if you have any ideas or any features that you want to request, or any suggestions, you can add those things. Then you can also look at the roadmap, what are the new features that we are coming up with, and you can also give us the feedback. Then we also have phone support. We do have local numbers on the website, or you can contact me or Vikas if you have any issues. We would be more than happy to assist you guys. So, any questions? All right, I think we are good for today. Thank you everyone for joining for this session. And in case if you have any questions, you need any help, please feel free to email me or Vikas, and we'll respond to you guys. Thank you so much. Thanks, James. Thanks, Vikas. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.